Hello everyone, welcome to the next video of our Python programming series. Today we will take a look at the OpenAI Python library and we will use it instead of using bare HTTP requests like we did before. I wanted to cover the basics first before we move to the OpenAI abstractions. Okay, so let's get started. First let's add the OpenAI library to our requirements.txt as well as Pydantic. We will need Pydantic for structured outputs. Pydantic is a data validation library for Python. Okay, now let's do pip install requirements.txt. Alright, now I'm going to create a new file called newscript.py. So, first, from OpenAI, let's import the OpenAI client. Let's also import load.env, so from .env import load.env. Let's also import JSON and OS. That should be enough for now. So first let's call load_.env to load the environment variables. And the next let's declare our client. Client equals OpenAI. What this client does basically, it sends our request to the backend, and it also automatically adds the headers, the URL, and some parts of the body. We don't need to specify authorization bearer. As you can see, I did not pass our API key here because our variable is called OpenAI_API_key, and that means that the OpenAI class will automatically search for it and load it. Now, if our environment variable was named something else, we would have to use os.getEnv and then pass it using the API key argument. But we don't need to do that. Okay, so let's start by sending a simple request. So client.responses.create. Let's specify the model. This could be anything you want. And let's specify the input. So, hello, how are you? Now we can just print our response. I would also like to print the type of our response and also call dir on the response. Okay, and let's run the script. So Python newscript.py. Alright, and as you can see, this is not a normal dictionary, but an object of class response. Well, this class is defined here, and it has these methods. Now, before we go further, I would like to also talk about one more parameter, and that is temperature. Well, the temperature tells the model how random the answers should be. So, in most use cases like retrieval augmented generation or AI agents, we should set the temperature to 0, so we get similar outputs every time we call the model. Let's do just that. And before I run the script, let's also print the text. So response.output, first element in the output array, dot content, the first element in the content, and then dot text. And the max value can be 2.0. So if I set this to 2.0, we can get some pretty strange results. Okay, here there's nothing special, but if I ask, hello, explain to me what Python is. And as you can see, I received some complete garbage. What even is this thing? Ugh. You see, the first sentence makes some sense, but the next one is like, what even is this? So you should probably never go above like temperature 1.0. Use 1.0 if you want creative outputs, but most of the time I would recommend sticking to 0. Okay, next. How do we preserve the context of our conversation? Well, pretty much the same way as we did in the previous episode. So, let's just copy our messages array. Okay, well, maybe that one. Space it here. Now I can just do input equals messages. So let's add 2 more items to our array. Change the role here to assistant. Maybe the question here, what is the red planet? Red planet is Mars. This is hypothetically what the AI model answered. And here let's just ask, what did you respond? Okay, and let's try that. Oops, this should be, oh no, sorry, not this, but this. Output text. Okay, so by passing an array of those dictionaries, we can preserve the context of the conversation. Right, now let's focus on structured outputs. But first we will have to import, or actually from Pydantic, import base model. Now we will have to declare a class. In the previous episode, we used cities as an example, and we declared 5 properties: name, population, average weather, country, and is a member of a Schengen zone. So now instead of doing that weird JSON, we can just create a normal Python class that inherits from base model, and we can simply just input all of those fields as a normal class fields. We can get name, population, average weather, country, and is Schengen. And we can also create a class that uses this class. So for example, class cities has an array of class city. Now we have to send the request to the backend. And we'll comment this out for now. Okay, and instead of using client.responses.create, we have to use .parse so that our structured output is actually parsed. So the first parameters are pretty much the same, so model. Next, input. Okay, let's do maybe list me 10 interesting cities in Brazil, for example. I've never been to Brazil. Let's set the temperature to 0. And now we must use the text format parameter and set it to what we want the output to be. So in my case, this will be cities. Now let's print the response and see what's inside. Right, and as you can see, this is our response. It is of type parsed response cities, and it has the normal text. It's here. This is just the JSON, but we don't want to use that. We want to use the parsed field, which is of type cities. So instead of that, I'm going to print response dot output parsed dot cities. Let's run that. Right, and there we go. This is an array of these objects. Now let's just print everything from that. Cities equals response dot output parsed dot cities. So now in the for loop, let's print all of the fields of class city. Nice. Well, in Brazil, all of the is Schengen fields will be false because it's in Brazil, not in Europe. So maybe list me 10 interesting cities in Europe. And before I call the script again, I'm going to import one more thing from Pydantic, and that is a field. And with the field, we can further specify our variables. So for example, I would like the average weather only be a one word. So maybe let's specify one word only. And I would like the country to be the ISO 2-letter standard. And maybe the population description in thousands. Okay, now let's run the script. Alright, next, let's check out how to call tools and how to stream text. So let's comment everything here. And now to call tools, you have to copy the tool schema that we created in the previous episode. So here, I'm just going to copy that. And I would like to only have one tool for now. So this will execute the function, execute cmd command. You also have to pass in properties the command as a type string. You also have to import from tools, import, execute cmd command. Now let's call our model and let's provide the tools argument. So client.responses.create the model, tools, and the messages. Or actually, instead of messages, I'm just going to input a simple string. List me items in the venv directory and in the __ pycache directory. Now this make the model call two tools. Let's print the response.output. Okay, we received two objects of class response function tool call. That's interesting. As you can see, this class is an OpenAI types responses.response function tool call. We will have to import this class. Okay, let's check what will happen if we don't want to call any tools for now. I'm also going to save this in a comment. We've got response output message, and if we get that, we do not want to call any tools. So let's import these two types. So from OpenAI, types.responses, import response function tool call, and also response output message. Now let's go back here. Now I would like to iterate the response.output array, but only if we actually get a function tool call. So if response.output 0 is an instance of function tool call. Now for tool call on response.output, keyword arguments equals JSON.loads tool call.arguments. You have to use JSON.loads because arguments is actually a string. Now x equals execute cmd command *** keyword arguments. Okay, let's print the x to check if this actually works. And here, let's bring back the previous prompt. Okay, the tool calls has worked. Okay, so now I would like these function outputs to be formatted by the AI in a more human-readable fashion. So to do that, we have to call our model again. So client.responses.create, specify the model, and let's specify the input. But we also have to add to the messages the tool calls that the AI model has called and the tool call outputs, which basically means what the function has returned. So here, let's add to the messages the function call. So messages.append tool call to dictionary. Let's print the response. Because now this will return the status code 400, which means that the request was wrong. See, bad request 400, no tool output found for function call something. So now we have to append a function called output. So messages.append type. This object will be function underscore call underscore output. The call ID will be the tool underscore call dot call ID, and the output will be just X. Now let's see what happens. Whoops, or actually to make this work, let's copy that, comment here, let's paste this here. Let's just paste this input here. Okay, that's my bad. Now input equals messages. Because I forgot that we actually need the messages array to do that. And it had some red planet information. Okay, so this works. Let's make it more, let's display the text. Response.output 0 content 0.text. Okay, sorry, this should be outside the for loop. Because it generated multiple responses. I didn't want to do that. We just want to formulate the final response once. Okay. And here we see the contents of the PyCache directory and the venv directory in a more human readable way. Before we continue, we have to also talk. Before we continue, we also have to handle streaming. Now maybe let's comment everything here. The messages can stay though. And then at the end of the file, let's call our client.responses.create again and set stream to true. Now this is going to be a generator now. So for chunk in response, let's print the chunk. Okay, we have something called response function call arguments delta event and a response output item done event and also a response completed event. We don't need to use that. We just have to use response output item done event because this contains what we want to add to the messages array. But what will happen? We just do hello. Well, we are going to get a different delta event now. As you can see here. So we need to import these two things. So here I'm going to add response text delta event and also response output item done event. Let's go back down. Okay, now if the chunk is an instance of response text delta event, we are going to print it similar to how we did in the previous episode. So just print this, but instead of dictionary we have an object, so chunk.delta now. Okay, let's see how this works. Nice. Now, else if the chunk is an instance of response output item done event, we are going to add it to our messages. So messages.append chunk.toDictionary. Okay, let's change the messages to call tools again. So hello, list contents of the PyCache directory and the venv directory. Let's print chunk.toDictionary now. And we received two tool calls. And now we have to check if the chunk is actually of type function call. But this was the dictionary. response function tool call. So if isInstance chunk.item response function tool call, we'll have to execute our tool. And here chunk.item. I also append to the messages here regardless if it is a normal response or a function response, because we have to do it anyway. So now let's print x. Nice, we see our function has been called. Okay, so then messages.append, same thing as here. Here chunk.item.callID. Now I would like to specify a flag, tools called, which will normally set to false. But if this happens, I'm going to set this to true. Now outside of this for loop, let's get another response. So that will be response equals client.responses create. Let's copy these. We don't have to pass the tools again. Now in a similar way, for chunk in response, I'm going to simply copy that. And this should be enough. Oh, and before that, we only want to call that if tools have been called. Because else, nothing happened. And we don't want to call our model again to formulate the response. Okay, let's try that. Oh, here we have to do chunk.item. I'm so sorry. Very important here. Now this should work. Perfect. The content has been streamed. Nice. Okay, so armed with this knowledge, let's upgrade our CLI bot to use the OpenAI library instead of using bare HTTP requests. Actually, I'm going to create a new file called CLI bot 2. Okay, first let's import all of the tools we have defined here. Let's also import OS. We also need JSON. Now from OpenAI, import OpenAI. And also from .env, let's import load.env. Let's also import more of those types here. Let's define our CLI bot class. In this file, we did not use classes, just the simple messages here and other normal variables, but I would like to organize everything so it looks more professional. Let's declare a constructor. It will take two arguments, messages and API key. I mean, technically free, but you know, that's how Python works. So let's declare self is running boolean, which will be normally set to true. Let's also declare the system message. I'm going to define this function in a minute. And let's also declare the messages array, which will have the system message as the first message, and then the messages from the constructor. Let's also define our client. So now let's define the getCurrentDir.info method. Get_current_dir.info. Now this is going to be a static method because it will not reference any of the variables from our class. Let's use the static method decorator. Now we can just copy everything from here to here. Let's also fix the indentation. Perfect. Okay, the next thing is the tool schema. So self the tool underscore schema equals, and we can just copy everything from our previous episode. that whole array. Let's also create the tools dictionary, which we have also defined in the previous episode. Let's copy that. Nice. This is the end of our constructor. Now, I would like to define a method called execute_tools, which will take self and tool calls, which will be of type list, response function tool call. So for tool call in tool calls, let's get the keyword arguments. JSON that loads tool call.arguments. And let's call the function using our mapped dictionary here. Now let's append to the messages the function call outputs. Nice. And we don't want this function to return anything. Now, the next function will be called askAI. It will take self and the user input as a string. Our chatbot is not running, let's just use return. Now let's print separator. Basically, this function will cover the logic that we defined previously here. Let's cover everything in a try except block for now, because I would also like to handle the exceptions if something went wrong. Let's define a new message. Next, we have to append that message to our messages array. Now we have to generate a response, just like that. And now we will have to basically copy what we have created here. Whoops, that's a lot of errors. Let's fix that. Okay. Now let's also do self.messages here and here, as well as here. Okay, and okay. Finally, we also created a separate function for executing tools. So I'm going to remove that and just do self.executeTools. I'm going to declare an array called tool_calls. And here I'm going to append to that array toolCalls.append chunk.item. Okay, and if tools called, let's do self.executeTools. Tool calls. Nice. Okay, and hopefully, if everything went wrong, that should be enough. Now for the exceptions. Well, in my experience, there are two main exceptions that may have occurred, and that's an authentication error and a bad request error. So a bad request error happens when, for example, we change something from our schema and it doesn't work. Or the authentication error could fail if, for example, an API key was not valid anymore. Okay, so now let's also make this message better. And after everything completes, let's print another separator. Great. Now, if the name is main, okay, let's copy this. Okay, we don't need this and this. We only need to load the .env. Let's get our API key so that we know how it's done. So os.get OpenAI _API _key. I'm sorry, get env. Okay. Let's create the CLI bot. So CLI bot equals CLI bot an empty array, and an API key. Now, while CLI bot.is running, we want to do CLI bot.askAI user input. And here, instead of the break, I would like to do CLI bot.is running equals false. Let's see. Hyphen CLI bot2.py. Oops. Let's do hi. Hello, how can I assist you today? What's inside the git ignore? No tool found for function call something. Okay, that's my bad. We want to call the response here, the final response, after we executed tool calls, and only now. Okay, let's try again. Hi. What's inside git ignore? The git ignore file contains the following entries: .env, pycache, and venv. You don't want to commit those files. Okay, let's try again. I'm not sure what happened here. Hi. What's inside git ignore? Thanks. Oh, and here we want to append chunk.item. I'm sorry. Now, hopefully, this should work for the final time. Hi, what's inside git ignore? Thanks. Nice. Okay, we also don't want to print that. So here, let's remove that print. And let's try again. Hello. What is inside the venv and the pycache folders? Nice. Okay. Can you copy the image.png 10 times? Nice, it has been copied, okay. Make or change the background of all copies to a random color. As you can see, this happened. Nice. Perfect. Blur half of the images and scale down the other half. Okay, it created a lot of copies here. Let's check that. Okay, this is smaller. For example, this is blurred. Perfect. Delete all of the images except image.png. Yes, continue, please. Nice. Okay, so it seems that our CLI AI agent is working. Now, before we end this video, I would like to check if this exception works, and maybe if this exception also works. So for example, if we change the API key here to something called blah blah, and then call hi, we see the API key is not valid. Incorrect API key provided, blah blah. Nice. And also, if the schema is wrong, for example, if I change additional properties to additional properties A, we will get invalid schema for function blur image. Perfect. Okay. So let's test our CLI bot for one final time. What's inside? Requirements.txt. Nice. Blur the image.png. Okay. Change the color of the file you created to light magenta. It works. And make the image really tiny. Boom. Nice. Okay, so that would be it for this episode. That was the last video, at least for now, about the OpenAI API. I'm not sure what the next episodes will be about, but I have some interesting ideas. So stay tuned, and goodbye. See you in the next one.